Well, today is November 17th, 2015, and we are interviewing Ted Randall at the Illinois State Library. Ted is 75 years old, having been born on July 31st, 1940. My name is Sue Burkholder, and I will be the interviewer. Ted, would you please state for the recording in what war era that you served and what branch of service you were in?
Actually, I served just previous to the Vietnam War. And the years.
What branch of service?
What branch? United States Navy.
Navy. All right. Well, let's start with just a little bit about yourself, where you were born, a little bit about your family, maybe siblings, parents, and that type of thing.
Okay. Well, my name is Ted Randall. I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, back when it was East St. Louis, Illinois, in an area called Lansdowne. And my family was made up of my father, who was a radio announcer at WTMV and the Broadview Hotel in East St. Louis. My mother was with us, and I had a sister who lived with us as well. My father passed away when I was between 12 and 14, and I don't know for sure because it was a bothersome time. But he passed away, and I moved in with my grandparents in Chatham, Illinois, which is very close to Springfield, and grew up the rest of my life there.
Okay. Did you have any other family members that joined the service or served at any time?
Not really, no.
Okay. And what was your occupation before entering the service?
Before entering the service? Actually, I was young enough that I wasn't working.
Okay. So how old were you when you joined?
I was, I was 18.
All right. How did your family and friends feel about you going into the service?
They were concerned about it. There was a lot of talk about the war conditions and everything, but I don't know, I was just determined to do it.
Okay. And you enlisted?
I enlisted.
On your own, that's good. And why did you choose the Navy?
I don't know, I've always thought a lot of the Navy. I've always thought that that's where I would like to be, and so that's why I joined the Navy.
Okay. And what were those first few days after you signed the papers and you headed to your first to training? What were those first few days like?
There was some concern. I had a relationship with my wife now, and shortly after I joined the Navy, we got married. And she had some concerns about that. Outside of that, I think that everything was just kind of normal.
Okay. And where did you go for your basic training?
I went to Great Lakes.
When you left or when you arrived at the training camp, what were the early days like there? The first couple 3 days.
Confusing. Believe me, confusing. They started right away. What I remember about being in the Navy is the fact that I grew up more during the years I was in the Navy than I did before or after I belonged to the service, okay? And it started at the very beginning, believe me. People didn't say anything without a purpose, and without a purpose, you weren't required to do something, but everything had a purpose, everything had a reason. They told you what it was, and that's what it was, and there was no way of going another direction. So it was very good, very good.
Okay. Did you have any memorable instructors that jump out to you more than others?
I do have, but I can't remember names.
And why are they memorable?
Why? I think the way that they treated everyone, not just me, but everyone. Everything was. No one was really, let's say, a bullyish. But they were very determined about what you were going to do from the very beginning. I think more so in the beginning than as time went on.
Okay. And what was the training like? What kind of situations or maybe a couple stories about your training time.
I wish I could tell you. Listen, it's been a while back. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. After you completed training, did you get a leave or did you go straight into a duty station or another advanced training?
Actually, when I was completed, I was called to the side and said that I had been chosen for a honorable position, and did I want to do that? In other words, would I agree to do that? And I didn't understand what they were saying. And they explained to me that I would be in the United States Navy Ceremonial Honor Guard in Washington, D.C. And I just fell apart. I thought, wow, that I can't believe this. I can't believe that I'm good enough for this. Well, when you're that young, it comes upon you, and you don't realize how you got it. The reason you get it usually is because you just were chosen out of a group of people, okay? But you don't understand that when you get it. And I readily said, definitely I will do that.
And how was that? How, as you entered that, how did you adapt? And was it something that you always enjoyed, or?
Oh, from the day I walked through the door, I enjoyed it. Believe me, I just, I actually started out, a friend of mine who lived in Lincoln, Illinois, not a friend of mine, but an acquaintance, not really an acquaintance, but because of our location, Springfield to Lincoln's not very far apart. And he was a clerk in the office, and he said, would you like to go do that? And I said, I'd love to do that. Well, I did it for a while, and I wasn't very happy. Other people were going out and they were doing the things I wanted to do. And so they let me try for a position called head body bearer and drill team and those kinds of things. And I made all of them, and everyone indicated that they would like me to be a head body bearer. They would like me to be on the drill team, and we would go to different places, ballparks and movie theaters and that kind of thing. And we would, the drill team would entertain the group that was there. And then and the body bearer, I went out to Arlington National Cemetery, and they would bring the caisson up with the body, and we would take it off the caisson and carry it to the grave. And after doing that for about, I'd say 3 months, I was asked to be a head body bearer, and that's the person that takes the flags and folds the flag and tells the rest of the group to leave the gravesite, and took the flag to the family. So that's what I did as a body bearer. On the drill team, I served as a drill team. I'm not, you would be a petty officer in order to be in charge of the drill team.
Okay. So, I know this was something that you were honored to do, and how long were you able to serve in that capacity?
2 years was the maximum, and I served 2 years.
Okay. And during that time, is there anything memorable, even about maybe the relations with the other folks that are doing that? Anything memorable that comes to mind?
Relations to the other folks that did that, I joined a foundation when I was done, the Honor Guard Foundation, and I've kept in touch with about 4 of those people that I served in the Honor Guard with, not on a daily basis, and we don't see each other very often at all, but the names are very familiar, and they're very familiar because we keep in touch with each other by email. And I have not been to, and I'm going next year, to a ceremony that they have each year, but I've never been before. And they're all wonderful people, believe me.
Yeah. So you just talked about staying in touch via email, but back when you were in the service, probably writing letters, an occasional phone call, were your modes of communication with your family?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes.
When you were serving, I'm sure you made some close friends, and you just spoke about getting back together with the group. While you were in, did you have time for entertainment and relaxation? Those type of things? What do you remember what you might have done?
Wasn't long after I got into service and ended up in the barracks that I married my lovely wife. And we've been very, very close from the beginning, and we'd spend a lot of time together. She moved out there with me, and we stayed. He had an apartment that we stayed in, and when I wasn't, serving guard duty at the gates or doing something like that, then we were always together. So I didn't really do much of anything unless it was, a group of married couples. The others didn't hang around together.
So if I was going to ask you what the food was like, but if you were in an apartment, you were able to make your own food, so it was probably pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you, the food was good at that site. I can remember the food; it was very good. But when I went on a destroyer in the third year, that's the best food. Let me tell you, it was fantastic.
Okay, so you left that and you were on the destroyer, and what did you do during that?
Actually, I was a seaman, and I was also in an office there as well.
Okay, all right. And did you see active duty, or sorry, not active duty, but any? Were you deployed to during any war or any conflict?
No.
No. Okay.
No, we went to various places, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the islands around the south of us and everything. We were at all of those, and it was very, very nice. We could leave the ship and go have fun. As a matter of fact, one of the things I remember that probably won't make a bit of difference to this, but you can erase it, and that is that's when I first saw the stage play. What was it? It's my favorite one. Isn't that terrible? We saw it at the theater, and it was the original one in New York City.
Okay. So what other did you do? Training exercises? Since there was no conflict that you were involved in, were there training exercises or anything like that?
There were. We were out in the ocean a lot of the time, and we went through training there as well, consistently. And when new people came on board, we worked with them. So a lot of that occurred. A lot of it was very effective.
And what was it like being on board a ship for a long period of time?
I don't know how else to put it. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it very much.
What was it that you enjoyed?
Probably the relationships, the friendships that you had. There were a couple of people that were not liked by much of anyone, but a few of us would call them to the table, and we'd eat with them, and we'd have fun with them as well. But by and large, the executive officer and the captain of the ship and those people were all very nice people. In charge.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, did you go from the serving on the ship to another position?
No, I did not.
Or you got out after that?
I left. Yeah, I can remember that as well. I remember anything, because probably the best friend I've ever had in my life was a guy named Walter Archer, and I called him La Rechla, and they called me Ladnar Bidet, which is Ted B. Randall backwards. And when I left the ship, I remember seeing him on the front of the ship, and I got off and walked up the gate and to the gate and turned around, and there he was, and we waved goodbye. I'll never forget that day.
All right, well, then...
And by the way,
yes.
What's interesting about that is I kind of lost touch with Walter. But later on in life, I found out from a friend of mine who looked him up and found him and gave me his phone number, and I called him. And I said, is this Walter Archie? He said, yes. I said, I'm Ted Randall. He said, I'm sorry. Who are you? I said, my name is Ladnar Bidet. And right away he knew me. Right away he knew me. And so I wanted to meet with him, and I said, Walter, why don't you come to Springfield? I will pay to get you here. And he said, I will do that. And I got a phone call the day he was, about a week before he was supposed to come, and it was his daughter, and he had passed.
Mm-hmm.
So another sad time.
Yes.
But that's from the service. That's friendships you get in the service. Those are lasting friendships, believe me.
Yes. So when you returned home, you stayed involved with, I believe, did you say honor guard after you came home? Was it, or was that during the time of service?
Actually, there's a foundation. There is an organization, and I joined that.
Okay.
They came out and asked if I wanted to be a part of that, and I said yes, I would. And I've been a part of that ever since.
And what do you do with the foundation?
Actually, not much of anything really. I have done a few things. I've shared information with them so that they could put it in their newsletters and in their information about the service. And I'm going to, as I said earlier, I'm going next year to one of their ceremonies.
Okay.
Long time ago, though.
Yeah. Well, the question was, back in the days, the honor guard days, what was it like during a day or during a time that you served?
What was it like?
The honor guard, yeah.
Well, in the honor guard, actually,
yeah.
there were a couple of things that you would do. Okay, you would. It depended on where you were set. In other words, I was set to, for instance, what we did was when I was there, we would meet Dwight D. Eisenhower at Andrews Air Force Base, and we would meet him when he came in. But that was not just the Navy. That was the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force and the Coast Guard. That was a combined honor guard that would meet him, and that was amazing. It was the President of the United States. Then what we would also do is, as I said, we would deliver the bodies of our honored soldiers, a Navy, in our case, to the grave site and bid our farewell as well as the family's farewell to them, and then the rifle bearers would give the shots, and you'd hear the trumpet play behind the scenes, and that's what we would do. All
right. Is there anything else, like during your time, that you were actually before you were discharged? Is there anything else, other ways that you served that we haven't talked about?
No, not really. Those are the two things that I did.
That was the main
I think one of the things that I remember is that if you have to remember the years that I was in, and in those years, when I was in the honor guard, and that's not true today, because today some of the finest people that serve in the honor guard are black. Okay, they're African American people. And back when I was there, they weren't allowed to be in, and that was unbelievable. And I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, and I had a lot of black friends when I was there. And what happened was, I can remember this one gentleman, they brought him in, and he was black, and he stood over at the side, and about 3 or 4 of us, I guess, went over and chatted with him, and the chief petty officer walked over and asked us to move away from him. And they called him to the side, and they said, okay, he said, we're going to decide what we're doing with you, and just stay here and we'll find out. And then they came to us and said, go to the other room. And they moved him out of the barracks. He was not allowed to stay there because of the color of his skin. I don't think people really realize how prevalent that was at that time, and I don't think they realize that the people that they did that to were probably as honorable, if not more honorable, than a lot of the folks that served in the Honor Guard. That's how I feel about it.
It's definitely a different time. Let me think. Do you?
Oh, by the way, and you asked about what I did when I was there, and something just hit me that I didn't mean for it
Okay,
to.
sure. No, go ahead.
When
Please.
we met with Eisenhower, I stood a death watch for Fleet Admiral Leahy and Fleet Admiral Halsey, okay, along with other people, not just me, but it was Honor Guard, and it was all Navy though. And we would go to the tomb because we buried. Actually, we put the last the unknown soldier in those two tombs, and then we would go out later and we would stand at the tombs along with a collective Honor Guard and the Army, which was without a doubt the best. They serve as guards at the unknown soldier tomb, and they would go through a ceremony, and we would stand there, and then we would leave when we were done. That happened quite often.
That was a time for me I've only read about in history books and some of these things, and it's very interesting to hear it come alive.
Very, very interesting to be a part of it. When you're my age, you didn't think about it like that. You thought about, wow, I'm a part of this. No, you didn't think about it that way. You thought about the fact that this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and back to when you were on the funeral detail. Is there any one or anything that sticks out there, whether it be something that you did during that time or one of the services that you were involved in?
Probably the one that I remember the most is not the fact that I think the most honorable thing we did was to say goodbye to our honorable servers, okay, those persons who served us in the armed forces. That's very true, and I think everyone felt like that at the time. But there was a time when they pulled a hearse up to the gravesite, and usually it was a caisson and pulled by horses, and as the head body bearer, I would be in the back, and the gentleman would pull that casket off the hearse, and we would march it up to the grave and lay it on the gravesite, and I would hold the flag, and when the services were over, actually we folded the flag, and I would hold the flag and I would walk it up and give it to the commanding officer, and he would hand it to the family. That's how it worked. In this case, when they pulled up the hearse, they opened the doors and they pulled out this little small casket. It wasn't very big at all, and they called the head body bearer up, and unfortunately that was me. And it was I think it was about a 6 or 7 year old girl, and she was the daughter of the serviceman that was there and his wife. And they handed me the casket, and I held it like this, and I walked down to the gravesite with that, and I got to tell you, I cried from the time I started walking to when I got to the gravesite. It was just embarrassing to me. But I handed to the people who laid it down on the grave, and I backed up, and the mother came over to me, not the father, but the mother came over to me, and she said, "Don't cry." She said, "We thank you very much." Look. So that was probably the most, I remember that more than anything in the world. Mm-hmm.
Wow. When you carried the flag and gave it to the officer, I noticed that you held your hands
up
like that. And I had just seen that recently. Why is that? Is that just the why is that?
Well, that's how we were taught to do it, to be honest with you. It's an honor.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It looked very like cherishing the flag and just being very honorable.
Yes.
So. Very good. And honestly, that was just a few days ago that I noticed that, and something I was watching. So,
well, I will never forget those days.
Yes, and now, as a young person, because then you were what, 20,
Oh
around
my gosh,
20?
I was 19,
20 years old. How did the dealing with death, I mean, in the way that you were, how did that affect you? How did that affect your life? Well,
I don't know how to answer that. I really don't know how to answer that. I was very young when my father passed away, and I thought very much of him. He was very high in my mind and in my heart, and there were other things that occurred. I moved in with my grandparents, and my grandfather, shortly after I moved in with them, he passed away. And so when I went to the grave sites here, and I didn't even realize being at the grave sites in those cases, we were being of honor to the family. Okay, that's what we're there for. There was a total troop that followed us as well, and there were the people that shot the guns 3 times, and then there was they played the bugle. Okay, and then we were done with the service, and we would march away. I don't know how you explain that. I don't know how. I can tell you that the people that I have known that served in that part of my service have never been full of themselves because they did it. Okay, I don't know of any. Maybe there are some that were like that, but I didn't know of any.
Very honorable.
Yes.
Yes. Well, is there anything else about that time before we move on? Is there anything else about that time that you can think of that?
I'm sorry, I wish there was. I can't.
That's okay. So when you were discharged, what did you do? Where did you land, and did you have a career then after being discharged from the Navy?
Actually, I had a career when I discharged from the Navy. I went to work at an employment agency, actually, to begin with, and then I left there and moved back to Springfield, and I went to work for the State Board of Education.
And how long did you work there?
30 years. I was the Illinois State Director of Pupil Transportation is what I was for 30 years.
And then you retired from the state board, and then what did you do?
Moved to Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson. Okay. And how long did you stay there?
Probably, I would say about 12 years.
12 years. And then after that?
Got a phone call from this gentleman who said that he wanted me to bring my program back, which is Toby Tire Safety, and it's school bus safety for 2 outlets, primary and intermediate. And he said, I'd like you to bring the program back. I said, well, sir, you're not elected yet, but I'm sure you'll be elected Secretary of State, and I will bring it back for you and stay 3 months. And 17 years later, I still work for Jesse White, the Secretary of State. Amazing man. In many ways, not just the relationship that we might have, but that's not important. He is just an amazing person.
When or how do you feel like the time in the service and your experiences there affected the rest of your life?
I can tell you, I as I said, I grew up more in that period of time than I ever did before I joined or after I served. That period of time made my life. I have 2 master's degrees. I had my own business for a while until I moved back here. When I lived in Tucson, I had my own business. It was very productive. We came back here. We have Toby, And Toby is an amazing character, and I'll tell you why. Toby spins around and dances and blinks his eyes and moves his arms and gets people's attention. Children definitely, but adults as well. That's what he's there for. It's the message that he is given by another person, by the way. That message is so important, and it's so well received because of the way and the words that are used. Now, there are a lot of other programs, but none of them are as good as this one. I'll tell you why. In the last 17 years, the year before we started the Toby Tire program, and by the way, it's not all Toby Tire. It's the schools, it's the parents, it's the other people. But the year before, we lost 9 children. 3 years before, we lost 9 children in Illinois. In the 17 years we've had Toby Tire, we have not, God bless us, lost 1 child.
That is a great program.
Yes.
It is. Well, your military experience obviously had a huge impact on your life.
Oh my God! The military experience is what made me what I am today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. And that is a very good thing. So, are there any last comments that you can think of you would like to share? Anything, just in general about your service?
No, I think if you know, I noticed, I talked about the fact that I served on a destroyer,
Mm-hmm.
and that was good. It was a good service. It was experience well taken. It's the time before that where we were able to, and I still do, honor those that served us in the armed forces, and I hope that everyone always does that.
Yes. Well,
I've had people walk up to me and say thank you. And I want to say to them, I wasn't in a war. I wasn't in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, you're very, very welcome, because that's what they said.
Mm-hmm.
And if I see a serviceman, I can remember the time that I saw on the back of a windshield, this serviceman had died over in Afghanistan, I think. And it was a picture of him on a sticker his father had on the window. And I walked up, I said, may I have that? It's still on my window in my car. That's how you feel.
Yeah. Well, I realize that you didn't serve in a conflict, but you said, yes, I will go. And even though that wasn't part of your service, you said yes.
Yes.
And that's an honorable thing. And I want to thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.